Welcome back, you dropped pieces of pizza. Today we are talking about oat milk, which in my opinion is the goat milk. It's not goat, but it is the goat. Oat is totes, not goat, but it is goat. Let's get started. I wanted to ask 3 questions that I've seen a lot of you ask as well. 1, what is the difference between the oat milks that say nothing and the ones that say barista across the label? 2, what is the proper way to texture oat milk? Do you steam it hotter, cooler? Do you steam it thicker, thinner, somewhere in between all of that? And 3, which are the best brands to use at home and which taste the best and produce the best latte art? We're gonna find that all out today in this episode of Battle of the Oat Milk. So subscribe, please, right there. Answer the first question, what sets oat milks apart? We're gonna need to go to the back of the carton. And the first thing that you're gonna see is that the fat content on the Barista series is way higher. And really, that's the difference. Barista versions have more fats. And in the case of fat, we're often getting fat in the form of oils. While oat milk does have proteins, it doesn't have the same proteins that milk does, and it also doesn't create the same type of foam. It creates a more stiff and coarse foam that is a little bit harder to work with latte art. And that's where the fat comes in. Not only does fat add to the texture of the milk by making it more viscous and giving it a buttery mouthfeel, it's also going to naturally depress and destabilize a lot of that foam. The larger bubbles become less stable, and the smaller bubbles are so small that their surface tension is very low, so they're able to hang out and last a lot longer. The smaller the bubble, the more compact they are sitting together, which will slow down the natural drainage of bubbles, which is going to make your drink last longer and give you a more velvety, wetter foam. Let's take eggs for example. Eggs contain fats and proteins. The egg yolk is the fat and the egg white is the protein. And with using a frother, mix up the egg whites and you'll see that it creates stiff peaks of foam. This is actually how meringue is made. But if you happen to add back some fat to that foam, well then your foam is going to start to destabilize and it's going to end up being a lot looser. So at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to what are you using the oat milk for? Are you trying to make latte art or creamy cappuccinos and lattes? Well, in that case, you should definitely get the barista version. If you're just trying to add maybe a little oat milk to your cereal or make a smoothie, well then you're gonna wanna get the regular oat brand. You don't need to spend the extra money unless you really want a viscous smoothie or you like latte art as a side hobby. A lot of people say something along the lines of you need to steam your oat milk cooler or you need to steam your oat milk hotter. I wanted to put that to the test. Does it actually make a difference, and how well do these brands hold up? Hotter drinks have a faster drain time in the liquid suspended in the foam. So I would expect the hotter drinks to fall apart faster. And that's exactly what ended up happening. Just like in whole milk, the cool drinks lasted the longest and the hotter drinks naturally aged faster. After letting them cool down and tasting each one, the coolest one had the least impactful flavor, the middle one was a bit more balanced, and the hot one was by far the most bitter and least sweet. So don't freak out and start overheating your milk or under steaming your milk. There's no reason to do that. Just steam at the normal 140 and you are good to go. This is why oat is the goat. The next thing you often hear in oat milk is you should texture it more or you should texture it less. That is going to be entirely dependent on the oat milk you're using. So today we're using 3 high-end popular brands, Minor Figures, Califia, and Oatly, and we're going to put them through their first test, texture. The way we're going to texture oat milk is going to be identical to the way that we texture whole milk. And I'm going to go ahead and pull out my steam wand and place the pitcher spout against the steam wand. Then I'm going to submerge the steam wand tip directly into the center of the milk and then off-center the pitcher just a little bit. Turn on the steam wand and start by injecting a little bit of air, very gentle kisses of air for the first few seconds. For the thinner drinks, I'm going to keep this at 1 to 3 seconds. For the medium drinks, I'm going to keep this at 3 to 5 seconds. And for the extra thick drinks, I'm going to keep them more to 5 to 7 second aeration periods. Then after that, you're just going to resubmerge the steam wand and let it get up to the temp you want. First up, we have Califia. In my time making coffee, I have the most experience working with Califia oat. While I can confirm that Califia makes absolutely stunning latte art, they do tend to have a bit of a blob, kind of cartoonish look. The lines tend to be a bit less sharp than whole milk, and that same thing happened here. Califia is a great milk to work with. It created great latte art all across the board. It was very forgiving, though it did stand out a bit more on the thinner range, with a bit more pop. Pouring with thinner Califia milk kind of felt like pouring with whole milk, whereas pouring with thicker Califia milk just kind of felt like thick milk. So with Califia, I would recommend easing up on the air you add and focusing more on the grooming of the milk. Next up, we have the name in the game, Oatly. I was actually really surprised with how Oatly performed across the board, whether you texture it thin, thick, or somewhere in the middle. Oatly performed really well and consistently. On the thinner side, Oatly does slide around a little bit, much like thin milk does, but on the thicker side, Oatly started to behave a lot more like whole milk, so it was a lot more forgiving with how much air you could add to it. Across the board, these are all really beautiful drinks, though I will say the most textured drink stood out the most as far as latte art and mouthfeel goes. So with Oatly, I would recommend adding a bit more air. Last but not least, we have Minor Figures, aka the carton with the bird butt. Minor Figures performed really well through this test, though out of all three brands, it had the more narrow region of success. Texturing Minor Figures thin did not work out so well as far as latte art goes and as far as the texture of the drink goes. It was not very forgiving on the thinner side, though once you started to texture more normal, it actually became a lot easier to work with. And texturing a lot thicker ended up giving you a lot thicker foam that was a bit harder to work with, meaning you'd have to only texture it like you would normal milk, and if you textured it a little bit thinner or a little bit thicker, you might see that result in the cup. Lastly, I wanted to have them pitted against each other in a traditional throwdown. Let me know in the comments which drink you think ended up taking this throwdown. If you're like me and you like to steam in one pitcher and transfer it to another, aerate just a little bit more. That way, whenever you transfer your milk, you're accounting for that 10% or so foam loss that you're gonna get. Next, I wanted to get an idea of the experience of these milks with a taste test. So I put on a handkerchief and went ahead and started gulping down. Okay, they're thoroughly mixed. Just to do it even more, I don't even know what is what. Number one doesn't smell like much, so not a lot of oaty smell. That is a pretty nice balance of sweet and oat, but it's not like cloying sweet, like it's not sugary sweet, but it is sweet. Okay, number two smells a lot like oats. It's like I'm sniffing the Quaker Oats guy's hair. It smells just like what I assume the Quaker Oats guy smells like. If that's what he smells like, I'm assuming that's what he tastes like too. Way less sweet, much heavier body, so it's more viscous. As far as mouthfeel goes, it's a little more coating, and it does have an oat flavor, but you don't get as much of that sweet flavor from the first one. I actually really like that. It's really, really chill and calm. Probably reminds me the most of regular milk, but maybe like 2%. But it's thick though. That is Quaker man thick. Okay, number three does smell like oats, but not super strong. So number three is like if you combined number one and number two. Number three has the body very similar to number two, very viscous. It has an oaty flavor, but it is sweeter than number two. It's not as sweet as number one. And actually going back to number one, I would say number one has a much thinner body. I think this one is Minor Figures. Califia is number two, I'm assuming. Number three would be Oatly. At the end of the day, all of this is preferential. It's a matter of what you like and what you want in your coffee. If you want it to be a little sweeter, maybe a little lighter, you should go with Minor Figures. If you want it to be a little sweet and you like a little bit of viscosity, then you should go with the Oatly. Oatly is a classic. If you want something with a terrific body that can pour fantastic latte art and does not impart too much of a flavor, I would say Califia. Oat milk is the goat milk. And it is the goat milk because it most closely resembles whole milk out of all the alternative milk lineups. I hope you don't think that's a cop-out. If you want to take the skills you just learned about oat milk to the next level and increase your latte art abilities, make sure to watch this video right here on how to do basic tulips. It's gonna get you started right in the right place. Have a good rest of your day, you dirty, filthy scumbags. Cheers.